This is a podcast with Danny Gutknecht from Pathways and Chris Harry from Compendium Solutions. Welcome to our show, Leaders with Suspicions. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so first off, welcome to the podcast where we dive into the journeys of business leaders. So please introduce yourself and where you're calling from today.
My name is Danny Gutknecht. I'm the CEO of a company called Pathways, and I'm located in Phoenix, Arizona.
So tell me about your journey in this industry.
Well, I work in the human development industry, so you could call it human software. And my journey actually started way back as a child. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my grandfather was a home builder in western Nebraska, and I used to ride around in his pickup truck. And he built theaters and things like that. And I would ride around in the passenger seat of his pickup truck, and I kind of like he was a big role model for me. And the community liked him. He was a really fun guy to be around. And one day he sat me down when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and he said, "Danny, don't ever do this job. It's hard on your body." He started listing off all of his grievances, and it shocked me, right? Because this guy was kind of at a different persona in the world than what I had expected. And I think every day after that, I started to pay a lot of attention to how adults talked about work, life, and I started to notice all of the challenges that people had with their own jobs, how they kind of alternated between, I love doing this, I struggle with the environment that I'm in, and how we're sort of paradoxical beings. The next kind of big moment in my life happened when I was 14, and I was kind of bedridden for about 3 or 4 days, just with the stomach flu. And my uncle was a 60s hippie. And he brought me a CD to listen to it. And it was of a reggae punk band by the name of The Police. And it was called The Ghosts and Machine. And I listened to that album over and over again. And of course, when I got well, I went down to the ancient Google system, which was the library, and went through the Dewey Decimal System, the search bar, and I found myself down this row of books that I really didn't understand. I was too young to understand at the time. But the thing that stuck out to me was like, these are considered the deep thinkers for human beings. Why do they say it's so hard to be yourself or to know yourself? And after that, it was sort of a closet hobby for me to continue to read, digest, explore, and really try to understand, what does this life mean? What is it about for us? And if we spend 57% of our lives at work, what does that mean? And how do we parse that so that we can have a satisfying existence?
So where's the business at now then? How many people have you got? What you got some products on your website? Tell me a little bit about them. Some interesting phrases you use there.
Yeah. So our flagship product is called Meaning at Work. And what it is it's a program that I've been developing for a long, long time. I've had lots of collaborators on it. I collaborate with a good friend of mine out of Austin, Texas. His name is Bijoy Goswami. He also contributes a course to our programs called Journey of Communication. And what we do here is we help leaders and really just people, employees, understand who they are, what connects them to the job that they do, how their patterns work. I like to explain it fairly simply, which is we help you make unconscious models conscious and work with them to evolve them. And so we've all had those moments where we've had an unconscious kind of, why do I keep doing this? What is this pattern? We actually have built a process for people to understand those patterns for themselves and work with them. So the gap that we're filling as an organization is, if you go out into the leadership world, a lot of books, or even just professional advice world, a lot of books, a lot of things out there, they have some really good models, but most of them make the assumption that you don't know who to be or how to be. And so they give you advice, and then the leadership teaching doesn't really stick. Well, it turns out there's a missing piece to this, which is know yourself, know how your models work. And when you know how your internal set of patterns are, what models lie behind those, you can start to work with those. And then you can go out into the world and you can look at other models and go, oh, I like these couple of things about it, but I really not these. So I'll use this and kind of move forward.
Okay, so there's lots of different theories about how we work and how we process. I've recently heard people describe us as we have an operating system, and when we get training, we're upgrading our operating system. You've talked about models there, and I'm starting to think, are we just an evolved large language model? It's quite a tricky area to know what to trust, what to believe, and what's right and what's wrong. Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
It is. It's really been a lifelong journey of mine. One of the first, I started studying a lot of psychologists. And when I first jumped into the business world, what I would do for ourselves and our company is I would take models from the world of psychology and start to use them in real life. And one of the things that I quickly realized is that, well, a lot of these scientists have really good way of explaining things, but the adaptation and how do we use it on a daily basis to make our lives better struggles, right? You can't do that in a lab. You can't do that in an academic setting. So I started kind of going through this process of understanding those things. And one day I picked up a book and it said, we don't really interact directly with the world. We make models of it. There's this book called Structure of Magic. And it made sense to me because I was like, oh, if you watch people kind of navigate their environment, they're a little different in different contexts and different settings. And so we have something that Carl Jung calls a persona. Fast forward to today, there's a guy named Jeff Hawkins, wrote a book called Thousand Brains. Fantastic. Also aligns with the book that Ian McGilchrist wrote on The Master and His Emissary about neuroscience. And long story short is our brain makes models of the world. That's how we operate. It's a prediction machine. So essentially what happens is that we come into a context, and if everything's fine in the context, we can kind of go about our day and do the things that we normally do. If something's out of whack, our models alert us, hey, pay attention over there. There's a crack in the wall. There wasn't there before, something like that. And then we start to kind of hone in on that and go, is that what's off with that? So those models that we run, we've learned from childhood. There's a great guy by the name of D.W. Winnicott that talks about the play instinct in children. And if you kind of pay attention to what he's saying the most essential part of the development of a child is going from a play environment where they can take their imagination and put it into the world and interact with it. And over time, what happens is we start to develop our set of rules. You know, we have our imaginary friends, we tell them where to go, what to do. Then we find a friend who also has their set of rules, and we start interacting with that friend. Then what we do is we find some larger container that's got an arbitrary set of rules, and we get our friend in it, and we all start interacting in those. The key is that we keep upping the stakes of the game for emotional payoff or emotional maturity. And if you really map this to work, and one of the things that I like to say is work is an actual instinct. If you think about it, we like, hey, I got to go work on myself. Well, I'm going to go home and work on my garden. Right? So we're always kind of like engaged in some sort of work. Work is that sort of payoff that we get. And so that's where I started to understand the fact that, hey, We can understand ourselves through these patterns, through our interactions, and through our own development of this increasing set of sophistications and increasing set of emotional payoffs.
So I was quite interested in two things on your website. One is that you talk about differentiation. So, on the browser bar, it mentions differentiation. How does that play into this concept of you effectively building your rule set, and then you, I guess, decide what rules of other people's rule set you're interested in? So that could drive tribalism and fitting in with peers, really. But you've used the phrase differentiation. It was quite interesting.
So there's really two components to us as people. We, as Carl Jung discovered, we have this internal drive to express our uniqueness, our full self. On the other hand, we've got this other drive to sit in, the prosociality. The reason that we form companies, as Adam Smith, Edinburgh, Scotland, Adam Smith, founder of capitalism, found out through his pin factory experiments, is that we all have a way of kind of specializing in something and a unique way of looking at things. And when we work together, we're exponentially better than the sum of our parts. So if there's 10 of us working on something, it's not just 10x, it's might be 100x. So if you start to look at differentiation, one of the challenges that we have in organizations that where people do feel commoditized is when they feel like a machine part, when they feel like they can't bring their whole sense of self to work. And one of the things that we noticed way back in the 90s is that when people switch jobs, they're oftentimes just circling dualities instead of merging them. And so they might be leaving a job for a particular reason because they have some set of talents that they feel like are suppressed or not able to be exercised in that job. And then another job comes up and they're able to express those, but they forget that they're putting some of those other things on hold that they were already doing, and those get suppressed for a while. And so you kind of loop through a career at times instead of really kind of going, okay, what can I do at this place of work to kind of merge these together? Differentiation is the process of what Carl Jung called individuation. That process that you understand for yourself that helps you express all of the unique aspects of yourself and bring them to bear and put them into the friction of the world. Work through the tension with others to create something great.
Okay. So just a couple of different angles I'd like to explore now. One is about your services and one is about how you built the team. And they're kind of related, obviously, right? So you've got some quite, I'll call it vanilla services like executive search, right? And coaching. And then you've got a team where the balance seems quite strongly towards thinking and your values as a business. Yeah. How did you put that team together? How did you find those people? And was it the revenues you got that led to your hires, or did you build a team and then go and find the revenues? Really quite interested in how you took this proposition to market and built your team. Yeah,
everything that we've done here has been basically bootstrapped. We had a technology product years ago that we initially had built, learned a lot of lessons from that. But when the kind of post-economic meltdown happened, I found myself really trying to learn what cultures were about. And I'm kind of taking you way far back to tell you about how I built a team. But one of the things that we were doing is we had I came from the recruiting world in the mid-90s. And one of the things that jumped out to me was, wow, our interviews account for a lot of different things, skills, behaviors, things like that, but they don't account for meaning or motives. What really puts your feet on the ground in the morning, what energizes you to get up and go. And so there was a missing element to those interviews. And over time, what happened was when the economic meltdown happened, we no longer needed a recruiting business. Nobody was recruiting. And so we started to jump into organizations. I was actually in Leighton Buzzard, north of you, interviewing a company called B Aerospace. And we started to look at how cultures were formed. And we started to notice that there's a structure to culture in the way that people talked about it that wasn't in the marketing manuals. It wasn't in anything that you could say online. Everybody had their own expression, or own way of saying it. And so one of the key lessons for me in all of this was we've used multiple crises or constraints as a way to bootstrap the company from point A to Z. And so when the economy started coming back, we started to say, hey, let's use every tool in the toolbox and that we have. So we have this understanding of culture, we have this idea around training, and we have this ability to recruit executives in a very different way than a lot of people do, in terms of not only understanding the normal set of things that you do in an interview, but also that. So the challenge became, okay, the world kind of operates off of these basic set of patterns, and we've got a new technology here that helps us understand the motivational software of a human being. Who's willing to come into the company to do this work, to understand themselves for themselves, because sometimes understanding yourself is a little difficult. And then also, who has the skills and that sort of thing. So recruiting started to expand, and we started to use recruiting to fund our training business, which was something that was kind of conceptualized way back in 2012 and just kept gaining momentum. And so that's how we got to where we are. The team is kind of the leadership team is myself, my partner, and then we've not too long ago hired a PhD out of Arizona State University to really measure what we're doing, to make sure that we're not buying our own sauce.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's one of those things. I guess why I was asking around how you built the team, because you obviously need to attract people or find people and induct them to believe in the values that you believe as an organization. But obviously there's a whole danger of groupthink, and as you say, buying your own sauce there, really, isn't there? Yeah. So, how have you found that journey? Do you naturally find people who get and agree with your values and what you're trying to do? Or is it that you see they're a 60% fit and then they have to kind of like come into your journey and mix it up a little bit?
Well, what we look for is to make sense of somebody's journey from a meaning perspective. And let me define meaning. Meaning. I think my collaboration partner Bijoy Goswami describes meaning really elegantly. Meaning is the models by which a being parses its existence. And so part of what we do in our interview process is we go all the way back to, what were you fascinated with as a kid? How did you choose the career that you chose? Let's go step by step through every opportunity or every company that you've worked in, and let's uncover those patterns, and let's see if it makes sense to have a discussion around that. I don't look for people to align with the company values. I'm looking for shared meaning, right? What really drives you, and do you, here in my mind is the ultimate fit. If somebody can see Pathways, my company, as a vehicle for them to do better in the world, what they ultimately would like to go see happen in the world, then I know that I've got a really good match. So if they're like, hey, I think work needs to be better. I think I'd like to see people more engaged, perform, connected to it, and get a sense of fulfillment out of it. And that's my life work journey. Then I'm like, okay, let's talk about what it's like as an experience to work at Pathways, and let's have that discussion. I find it more interesting to look for values that people bring to the table rather than values that somehow retrofit ours.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess you don't get many people just looking for a job then. Yeah, just
No.
like give me a job. Yeah, okay. So the other thing that's quite interesting is the range of services. Yeah, and I find this quite a lot when I talk to people who are leading their own business and they've got their, as I call it, suspicions about how they want to be different. Is quite
Mhm.
often it's quite hard to sell. And what I mean by that is everybody puts in their pitch decks, we're a great place to work. We find the people who are the right fit. We've got great values and we all live them, Or everybody says in their pitch deck for new business the same stuff, right? And I see that in every industry, human resources, business process outsourcing, technology. Everybody says they're the same as everybody else. They're all at the top of the game, right? They're all value driven, culture driven, respectful, innovative. Everybody's ticked every single box. Okay. How do you get past the first meeting so that you actually get a chance to be believed?
It's interesting. To address that, there's a great ad. Are you familiar with Ernest Shackleton?
The Explorer.
Right. Yes, right out of the UK.
Yeah.
We don't even know if the ad is real, but it's fantastic. So when he was doing exploration to Antarctica, there's this little ad that I ran across online that says, "Wanted, men, cold, harsh conditions, return unlikely." like just spelled it out for them, to when he was looking for people to go on this expedition with him. Like I said, I don't even know if the ad is true, but it kind of drove the point home. When we work with companies and we tell them how to attract people, one of the things that we did is we take an interview. We take the same process that we use to help people understand themselves, and we turn it on the company as a self. And we actually go interview, usually an hour to 90-minute interview, 20, 30 people. We used to do this with almost 200 people in a company. And we really find out who they are, and then separate that out and find out who the company is. What's the company doing on its journey? So I'll give you a really good example. There's this company called Crossroads Hospice, and they're trying to compete for nurses in a marketplace. And one of the things that we did is we really started to find out that what was unique about their business model that really drove the point home was that they staffed their model different from other hospices, in the sense that the entire hospice industry ran off of this VITAS model, which was care, which had people attending death like less than 18% of the time in the last week of death. They wouldn't even see a nurse. This company figured it out to where they could get that up to 90 or 100%, 99, 100%. So the message to nurses was nobody should die alone. So instead of running a traditional ad, hey, you want a hospice nurse here? We just came right out of the gates. Do you believe that nobody should die alone? And we wrote a little bit around that. That's meaning. And so we led the ad with that. And we dominated the markets that they were in to help them attract some of the best nurses. It's also going to repel the right people too.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're not committed to that cause, which is what Shackleton did, repelled the right people, attracted the right people. And so there's this big number about you need volume of people to see. No, I need the right people to see, and I need to be real efficient with that. And so that's something that we use and we do all the time. It's like, let's lead with the real thing that people are here for.
But how do you use that in your B2B marketing, right? So, I mean, for the people watching this podcast, they all struggle. They might get an appointment, but in that first 30 minutes appointment, that you've got to come across differently, right? Otherwise, you're just the same people saying the same stuff, right? So how do you do that in a B2B scenario when you're
Yeah,
trying to get...
we have not perfected that by any stretch of the imagination. What we haven't perfected is how to get people on the phone. What we have done is once we get them on the phone, things usually go very well, because you can quickly tell a story to explain what you do. You can also ask a lot of questions to find out what they're dealing with and what they want to solve, what attracted them to you in the first place. And once we get into that conversation, things seem to go very well. People are intrigued, particularly with hey, we're actually here to help you leverage the best parts of yourself, and we have a method for that, as opposed to we have this solution that basically tells you who or how to be. And people that are looking to develop themselves, there's lots of advice out there. And if you take a lot of it, you end up kind of feeling like some sort of psychological contortionist.
Yeah. I was kind of where I was asking earlier on about there's so many different belief systems out there about how we work. Yeah. Yeah. So on your homepage, your website, you talk about unlocking potential from the inside out. Now, I find that quite interesting because my book on digital mixology, I basically talk all the time about the outside in as being the preferred way of working. So we're probably talking about different things, but as an outside in person, you're an inside out person, right? I find that quite interesting. So what do you mean from the inside out? And the reason I'm asking that is you talk about our models and our rule systems. Well, we might have learnt the wrong lessons. We might have a defective model in some way that will impact how we come into the world. And I very much advocate the outside in because it helps us listen and empathize and therefore maybe do the right thing. So we might be talking across purposes, we might be on the same page using alternative words. So what do you mean by the inside out?
Well, the funny thing is I think it's both. The first step that we take people through is we help them understand how their models work. And one of the things that they discover very quickly is they start looking back at their patterns and they go, oh man, I have some blind spots. I have some models or some patterns as they learn early. It's a little while before we really start talking models. But I have some patterns that I'm using in certain contexts that are not helping me, that are antithetical to what I want to do. I also have some things that I've kind of put on hold in my life that once I make conscious, I can understand and start to work with to be able to use in that context or use in another context. And so when you start tapping, what was it? One of the great Carl Jung quotes is what you resist will persist, or unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate, which is one of my favorites. So that's the power of tapping potential. You start to look at that potential. So we as people, oftentimes, we're adults. We're full of stuff all day. We have all sorts of stuff that we're doing. And we're very much outside in when we're working, right? We're dealing with objects and people and things like that. If you take the time to actually go back and kind of understand how your models work, what they say about you, and they're really not you, right? We're selves. As illustrated a little bit earlier, we're showing up differently in different contexts. If you really kind of do that work, if you mine it, and then you analyze it, you can start to synthesize it and personalize it for yourself, and then you can share it with others. The sharing part comes in, you start to interact, put it to the friction in the world, right? Because you can do lots of inner work, but unless you kind of give it friction. So you start to tap these things that you don't know about yourself, and then you go about your day interacting with others. And and going, oh wow, this person actually has some differences for me that I can collaborate with, right? There's a healthy tension that exists. So that's kind of the first phase. The second phase is we take this journey of communication course where you start to understand your communication model and where that works, where that doesn't work. And then we start to, as that evolves, introduce other models into the equation for you to examine and understand them, right? For yourself. And they look very different to you than they would to me, right? You can read a book and I can read a book, and we're both going to have very unique takes on what we thought was significant in that book, what we can use in that book. And usually a book is just purporting some kind of a model.
Okay. So you're trying to bring that to life. Yeah, you talked earlier about some
Mm-hmm.
technology. So tell me a little bit about your platform.
Well, the technology is the software, the internal software, right? So it's interesting, right? Because you mentioned earlier about AI. And if you look and see kind of like, I think Steve Jobs said it really well, the computer is a bicycle for the mind. I don't know if you recall that quote or have seen that quote online. So basically what he's talking about is like, humans are not really impressive in terms of walking, in terms of a lot of these other things. But what we do is we end up making tools. And so we make a bicycle and we can really move fast. We can now outdo a cheetah, or we can outdo, we can make a plane, we can fly, right? So the computer can actually do a set of calculations exponentially better than we can, right? We can build these elaborate spreadsheets and do all sorts of calculations with them. If you look at AI, what are we trying to outsource there? We're trying to figure out, are there redundant language patterns possibly that I can offload to my mind, because my mind has limited capacity. And at a core, what it may be doing, what we may be trying to do unconsciously as humans, is free up mental space for meaning, which is something that an AI cannot do. Right? It's run by tokens. So the software is you've got a model making machine, and you also have, when you collaborate with a group, you've got a supercomputer that works because it connects, and we start to leverage each other and get exponentially more than the sum of our parts. And so we help people work with their own mind and their own supercomputer to be able to tap meaning and connection and those sorts of things that, who knows, that may be one of the things that we get out of AI.
Yeah. So I was wondering how, leading on to a question about what are your operational challenges and how are you going to scale this business, the role that technology you're planning to play in that. So AI at the moment is quite often people using public AI, right? And at some point in an organization, you need to retain the knowledge and the recipe to have something and a platform to allow you to scale your business. So I just wondered where you're at on that journey.
I don't really know. We have folks around here that use it. Our PhD is experimenting with it. It seems like every time we find a good use case for it, there's holes in it. I personally probably use it more as a search engine or research engine to go hunt down links for me that pertain to very specific things. But, I don't know if you saw the research that MIT came out with, the fact that the more that we use AI,
the stock market, the one that made the stocks tank recently, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, the one that says that our mental acuity goes down about 40% by using AI. And Apple had a great report on it called The Illusion of Thinking, I think it was, where these models collapsed around the 7th or 8th grade level every time, even the best models across all models. So, you know, we're calling it AI now, but it's been called machine learning for a long, long time. And we're building that in. I just think now, the public is the experimentation lab. And instead of data, we're parsing language.
Oh, we're all free testers, right?
Yeah.
So what are your challenges in your business? What do you see your plans for the next year and the challenges meeting those?
We have spent a lot of time making sure that our programs are really solid. We put adequate research behind them. We've, carefully understood every step. I have 2 challenges. One is developing guides to do this. And we don't call them coaches, we call them guides, because we feel like that's a better way to go. My job is not to coach you. My job is to help you guide yourself on your journey so that you can acquire these tools for yourself. And yeah, it kind of goes back to the earlier thing. We're trying to help you be the best version of yourself versus something else, right? So that's one. 2 is, by nature of dealing in this space, professional development is a very crowded space. How do we stand out? And so we're at the beginning of sort of bootstrapping that journey of trying to figure out, okay, what are the organic things that we can do, the things that we can do to promote ourselves and to help understand and to interact with the market. We work with some pretty notable companies, but
I guess part of the problem there is actualizing the case studies, isn't it, and proving the return of this approach. And that very much links to data, which is one of our passions in terms of understanding how you use data for decisioning, right? So in your clients, you're improving their effectiveness one way or the other, aren't you? Okay.
Yeah.
So are they mature enough to measure that, or is that just something people believe?
I think it's both. We've measured the impact that this has on productivity.
Okay.
Yeah. And not everywhere. We have a very willing, the same company I was talking about that we helped in the hospice industry. We've been able to measure the impact, the ripple effects of working with very small teams in this and showing across very large sample size discernible monetary differences in terms of less patient transfers, less turnover in staff, longer longevity in staff, more productivity. So having people really tune in. And I'm sure that you could probably map this process to what you do, your data process. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have to do in any project is work out what are the KPIs, if you want to call it that you want to move, and how do you know whether you've moved them or not, and what is the latency of them moving, right? How can you prove the correlation between what you did and the fact those KPIs moved, rather than somebody else just claiming they did something else and moved them? Yeah.
Right.
That's quite a data-driven conversation, which is a bit tricky sometimes when people potentially are, in your case, looking to solve a recruitment problem. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's the obvious KPIs and measures, and then there's the more sophisticated KPIs and measures, right? You talked about longer tenure of staff. Well, that shows up in more productivity because your knowledge is not being eroded so quickly, right?
Mhm.
That's a more sophisticated measure, isn't it? And that's, success has many parents, as the phrases go, right? So that's trickier to claim, whereas the more near and simplistic KPI is probably easier for you to claim. And we have the same issue when we're building, machine learning systems for clients, particularly when you're looking at knowledge, how AI
Mm.
machine learning can improve the accessibility of knowledge within an organization. I mean, it's quite a intangible to measure in a tangible way. It's tricky, yeah, which is why we always ask on these podcasts, do you have any examples of it? So you just talked about your client has been able to measure those things and you do have them for your case studies, but was that part of their DNA that they thought in that way, or is that something you've had to do?
No, we had to bring it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The client basically engaged and bought flat out based upon a conversation that we had, and was kind of in hook, line, and sinker. And so over the course of working with them, first on a recruitment project, and then next on this training aspect, that's where it all came from. And I was like, let's measure it. And so they started giving me financial figures. They started sharing, turnover. So everything that we needed from a data perspective to run the tests. And that's where Ryan Stoll, or Dr. Ryan Stoll, came in. He started to kind of go through all those figures and numbers and say, what's here, what's not, what claims can we make about this, and what claims can't we make about it. And it's interesting because, to your point, right? So one of the ways that I bumped into Ryan is way back during COVID, when I was developing these courses one-on-one with people. I started looking for somebody, and I was like, people are saying that they really like what's happening in these sessions, but the problem is they're telling me, and I want to know what I don't know. I mean, heck, the whole purpose of the course is to help people understand what their unconscious patterns are, what their unconscious models are. And so I didn't want to have a blind spot. So Brian was at ASU and had a outside firm at the time that studied how human behavior changes the impact of its surroundings, right? So what impact does it have on these things? So I reached out, hunted him down. He ended up reading my book, Meaning at Work in Its Hidden Language. And he didn't respond initially, but after he read the book, he's like, we got to talk. So I had him come in and start studying first the people that were going through. And after about a year, one of the things that he said, I don't know how you did it, because I don't have a psychology PhD or anything like that. It's like, I don't know how you did it, but it's like you took 100 years of psychology, you've thrown out the couch, you've thrown out the therapy aspect, you've created some modern tools that people can use to be able to really make progress on their journey. And so after working with us for a couple of years, Ryan said, what if I came to work for Pathways? What you're working on is so interesting. And that's when we started to go inside of companies and study it.
Okay. So you're taking a concept like meaning and you're making it systemic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite a tricky thing to do, because meaning clearly has many meanings. Yeah. But you're making a system out of it. that can't have been easy to get right. So one of the things we like to talk about on this podcast is what went wrong, what mistakes did you make, and what did you learn? And for other people looking at growing and launching their businesses, what are the problems and challenges and issues and failures that they could learn from? What advice would you give them from the problems and challenges you've had?
We'd have to do a lot of podcasts to cover all the things that went wrong. This has been quite a journey. I mean, literally. If you look at things that don't go right as something you can not only learn from, but like something that kind of helps etch in that you're down the right road, that's the key. So the thing that I think people can learn from is like, as a founder, and I think anything in terms of building a company, is use all your constraints for innovation, right? Recognize that when you have challenges or deficits or things that you think you need, right, resources that you think you need, kind of flip the switch and go, what if I'm resourceful in this moment? What do I have to learn from this moment right here, right now? And what can kind of be the next step or phase of that? And I think that's how good stuff truly gets built. It's back to Winnicott and the play. You get an imagination. I want people to be more engaged at work. I think that there's a sense of fulfillment that we're missing. To do that, okay, if I keep chasing that thread, it's going to give me a lot of detours, a lot of setbacks, a lot of things like that. But that was an image in my mind that I kept chasing, or just it was like a dog with a bone. I couldn't put it down. And you just slowly construct and go seek out people that you're going to bump into, that you can learn from. I think the biggest learning thing for me, that I've always done, whether it was intentional or not, is I always migrated to people that would challenge my thinking. I didn't want yes people, even though you get those plenty in a business just because you're a CEO and people kind of bend their words to fit your ear. I do a lot of work to try to make sure that our team is bold and honest, and I do a lot of work to make sure that I have an outside network of people that will challenge my thinking on a pretty consistent basis. And that I can take some of the, hey, this isn't really working for me. This is a challenge that I'm having. And then, journal it down every day and put it to rest, come back a month later and read it. And you learn a lot about yourself that way. And your business, totally your business.
If you could make tangible, I guess, for people, there's probably many people who are looking to take some content, if I abstract it that way, and bring it to market in the way of value. So are there any particular lessons around mistakes or things that have gone well about you're articulating meaning as a way to enhance a candidate-based view of matchmaking and alignment with an organization? You're asking them to understand their models and their meanings so that they choose the right employers, and the employers therefore get the right people, and eventually the DNA changes and it becomes, a virtuous circle. Someone else may have some different content about something else, but the challenge is bringing that content to market. So I think for the general listener now, have you had any particular challenges or breakthroughs in how you've articulated your content, right? What advice or tips or mistakes would you point out for people about them taking their values and content to market?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is to trust yourself. I know that sounds overly cliche, but you really have to listen to yourself and speak those things that you normally wouldn't speak. Speak your own truth. The real magic, I think, happens when something magical feels like it happens. When you're just dead honest with yourself, dead honest with your company, and very open about that. And somehow all the right actions start following that. I think when you're looking to the outside world and you're kind of going, oh gosh, what did this role model do, or what did that role model do? It's not that that's not really good advice at times, but sometimes there's a lure to go, oh, well, what would Danny do in this situation, or what would Chris do in this situation, or right? You outsource that personal authority to something else besides yourself, and kind of digging into the struggle and having that conversation for yourself. That would be, I think, the best advice that I could give anybody, because there's something about your truth meter that just resonates with yourself and with others and helps you figure it out. So, for example, what's that?
Sorry.
You find that?
Sorry,
you find that true? Well, I was going to say, for example, when I was building these courses, I flat out would get done, and I'd be like, "Hey, I know I've got 20 years of kind of building this stuff, but I'm a novice in being a guide and providing this experience for you. Give me feedback. Tell me what you would change. Tell me what you don't understand. Tell me," right? And every little step of the turn, I was just curiously seeking honest feedback about what I was doing. And that helped me etch out something better than I could have done for myself, or just kind of in my own echo chamber of myself and people around me.
Yeah, I was saying that I find it easy to believe that people are attracted to authenticity, right? If I put it that way. You made a comment about 5 minutes ago about people being engaged in their work, and I think there is an issue with trust of it, people trusting employers, and people almost assuming that something's a job, not a career. They don't believe the words that people say anymore. Yeah. So I think actually people are quite attracted to authenticity. They actually quite admire it. And it is a selling power. So thank you for that, Danny.
It really
Right.
is.
So thank you very much. That was a fascinating podcast. I think there's a lot going on there in terms of taking something to market, which is about the value of a human in this time of AI. And so if anyone wants to reach out and get in touch, how would they do that, Danny?
I mean, you can reach out directly to me, Danny at pathways.io. Feel free to email me. Obviously, our website is pathways.io. And we'll be starting a podcast pretty soon. I've got a site, essencemining.com. Essence Mining is the methodology that I built to help people really understand themselves.
Yeah.
So those are probably the best ways to reach out to me.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. I really enjoyed that.
Awesome, Chris. Take care.